Every once in a while, an artist will do something really great. When Darwin opened his trunk and he brought out this piece of artwork, I don't even remember which one it was because he's done quite a few since then. But when I saw it, I thought that it was made by some professional person that you hear about but you never see.
Elsie saw a piece in Darwin's display area that was particularly appealing to her, both in terms of the quality of the work, but even more curiosity, because she looked at it and said, I think it was entitled Pete's Boot. And she looked at it and said, what's this boot doing here? And that enticed us to go in and start asking Darwin some questions, and found out that this was not just an old boot, but rather a uniquely crafted Pete's boot out of, I believe it's basswood, that looked exactly like an old boot. I think that's what got us excited first, but Elsie particularly took a liking to a piece of artwork which was called Honeymoon on the Buckhorn, which is a pair of I call them old granny boots. But Elsie just fell in love with those, and that was the first piece that we got from Darwin.
I grew up in a small farming community in southeastern Utah, in a community called Orangeville. It's a very small farming community where my family roots grow very, very deep. Grew up on a farm, and we didn't have a lot of the modern conveniences that you'd find in homes today. We had coal stoves, and farm life was a very tough life. It was often challenging, and we always had chores to do and a lot of things to keep us busy. We had none of the conveniences like television you'd have today at those times, and all of the work I did on the farm was done by a team of horses. And I think that probably started my love of the Old West and some of the artwork I do today. I worked at my artwork, oftentimes copying other artists' paintings and playing with pieces of wood, looking at things within nature and the beauty within, and trying to recapture that in art. Most of the subjects I did at that time was of old homesteads and subjects of the Old West. An individual in my neighborhood coerced me, I guess I would have to say, into polishing some rocks. And as I got a numerous amount of rocks polished, the desire to do something with those polished rocks took over. And I was very fortunate to find a very, very fine silversmith who taught me silversmithing. And through the next probably 10 years, I became a very accomplished silversmith through the help of this individual. The woodworking kind of came about a little differently. An individual brought in some duck decoys in the business I worked in and showed them to me and wanted to sell me some, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to buy one, but I think I could probably do that. And so having had previously a real love of working with wood and the artwork and also kind of merged together, and I began to sculpt in wood. Early on, I sculpted with knives and found that knives were very, very difficult to work with, and chisels were difficult to work with. In obtaining the type of detail that I desired to get in my wood sculpting. Initially, waterfowl and birds were the subject matter I worked with, and I found very quickly that if you're going to sculpt something or recreate something, you better know all of the details of what you're sculpting. I found very quickly that I did not know the anatomy of birds as well as I would need to know, and I didn't know the anatomy of ducks, but I drew on my past histories of life on the farm and realized that I did know a lot about the horse-drawn equipment and the old items from yesterday that I grew up with and many of my ancestors had. To get the detail, I found that I was going to have to go to a more sophisticated type of carving equipment. And I discovered some air-driven tools marketed by a company in northern Utah. The air-driven tools are a redesigned dental drill that turns approximately 400,000 RPM with absolutely no vibration. I can place dental bits in the tool that allows me to get extreme detail. Wood sculpting is not a rapid process. Probably 300 to 400 hours are spent in each piece. I have taken as long as 600 to 700 hours in the most recent buggy I completed. That obviously also does include the research I do for that particular project.
No one can believe that it's all wood. That's what's so unique about it. And it looks like the leather, and the seats are worn, and the armrests, you know, probably someone holding on real tight as the buggy would go over the ruts and such that has worn the seats here down. The steps up to get into the buggy are very unique. Everything about it is just amazing that it could be carved like it's been carved out of wood.
There's been a definite shift in my artwork throughout the years. I started with waterfowl and birds, and I found that I kept going back to my roots. Every time I would visit the family farms, I would find something of interest and think to myself, gee, I wonder if I could recreate that. Over the years, all of my artwork has gone into that type of subject matter.
My father had owned a farm up in Heber that was his weekend getaway. And at the end of the day in Heber, my dad would go into his old trailer and he'd take off his hats and his boots and he'd throw them on the floor. And Darwin did a piece for us that is called End of the Day in Heber. And very unique part of that is it looks just like it was thrown down on a sandstone stone, which is indeed part of the basswood sculpture.
The subjects I use in my artwork are of such interest to me is because they are from an earlier time. They're almost an endangered species, so to speak. They're items that most of us don't see every day, and there's a lot of heritage in each of our lives that bringing those things back to life will preserve forever. With every sculpture I do, a lot of research obviously has to go into it. Oftentimes, the subject matter I have already decided upon, and now it's time to decide how I'm going to depict that. If I find something setting in nature, such as the doctor's buggy as an example, I may try to capture the scene in art exactly as I found it, including the rocks, the weeds, and so on. In other instances, I may find something such as the old pair of shoes that I have recently sculpted, and I may think back and think of how would those shoes have been used, when would they have been used, who would have worn them, why would they be used at that particular time, and that's what I would try to capture within the sculpture I'm working on. Working in wood is much different than sculpting in other mediums. For example, if you were sculpting in bronze, you would start with clay and build it from an armature and a piece of clay forward. Working in wood is almost the opposite. You start with a block of wood and take away rather than add to. I love the smell of wood. I love the smell of new wood, and being able to take away from a block of wood to create something rather than adding to it. Working with wood is very unforgiving. Where working in clay, you can add to or subtract from as needed. I think the reason I add color to my work is because I believe it captures the true look of the item I'm working on. Now, this particular piece is depicting the Mormon handcart Martin Company coming across the plains to the Salt Lake Valley. It is exactly 15% of the actual size of the handcart. I want my work to be remembered as a preservation of past histories. Oftentimes, as people see a piece of artwork I have done, one of the first things they will say is, "Hey, that reminds me of my grandmother," or "My grandfather had one of those," or "I remember one of those when I was young." This is an abandoned handcart. An individual has recently been buried in the snow here. As you can see, down in the front, and her bonnet placed over the headstone. Inside the handcart would be some of the belongings of the individual: a trunk, a wash tub, maybe a sack of flour, a quilt, and a rope. And then on the back side of it, you'll find on the inside an axle grease bucket and a pitchfork. One of the things on this carving I would like to point out is the movement of the unit. As talked about earlier, in sculpting, it is very important for your eye to be led or drawn as you're looking at it. Focus down in this area with me for a moment. You'll notice that the rope that would typically tie the top of the handcart has dropped down onto the tongue of the handcart, but your eye should be able to follow up into this area. And then, as you'll notice, the opposite end of the rope has kind of been blown off, and the top has blown off from the wood that holds on to it. But you'll notice that top is in an S-curve, down off the top in an S-curve. And S-curves typically will force your eye in a direction. The canvas top is blowing back down in this direction, which would force your eye back down this way, which hopefully would bring your eye back down into this area. The log that the tongue of the handcart is laying on is also curved in somewhat of an S fashion to bring your eye back around to this area and again force it right back up into here. The base is also very important to do the exact same thing. So maybe just flipping it around, you can see that as this comes back, it will bring your eye back into this area, but then the next rocks point it back over into this area to force your eye back to the front of it. My philosophy in artwork and of any nature in working with wood is pure realism. Through my artwork, I feel I'm able to capture the most minute detail of any item that I'm sculpting and bring it to life as if you were looking at the real item. And my desire in sculpting in wood is to bring it from a craft into fine art. It's a fun realization for me to watch the look on people's faces. That first look of, oh my gosh, is very rewarding to me.
Jerry Anderson, noted Western sculptor, talks about Darwin Dower.
When he carves this wood that he uses, he does it with a fine eye to detail. And I saw that in him. In the Everything that he did on his piece of artwork was a piece of art, and it was detailed out to the finery. He had it painted, he had everything, every nail and every little piece put in perspective. But I think he has something going for him that the very few artists have, and that is first of all, a love for it, and also I think he's a student that he don't know about that's probably a God-given talent, and that talent he's used well in what he's portraying in the Old West.
Darwin has the heart and the feel for every piece that he does. I can take that same feeling from looking at the things that he has had as that he has done this work.